Before I dive into what happened that night, let me just say this: some moments sneak up on you. You think it's just a detour in your routine, a minor favor, a passing storm. But sometimes it's that one unremarkable evening that shifts the entire axis of your life. One drive, one thunderstorm, and one conversation I still carry with me like a folded letter I'll never throw away. Quick question before we begin. Where are you watching this from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. It always amazes me how far these little stories manage to travel. Now let me take you back. It began with a call just after dinner. I just curled up with a cup of chamomile, the good kind, with lavender feet on the Ottoman mystery novel in hand. My kind of night at 59, quiet, steady, soft around the edges. Then came the buzz of my phone. My sister Lorraine, always a little frazzled, asked if I could do her a favor. Her son Theo, my nephew, was stranded. His car had broken down en route to a weekend cabin trip upstate with friends. The others had gone ahead. Theo was left behind at the train station, stuck and waiting. Could I drive out to get him, Theo? 30, maybe 31 by now. We hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years. Technically my nephew, but emotionally, he always felt more like a distant relative you saw only at weddings. We were warm, polite, but not close. Still, I had no reason to say no. It was just a 45-minute drive. I dabbed on some lipstick, pulled on my boots, grabbed my keys. The sky had been grumbling all day, wind humming at the windows, low clouds sulking over rooftops. By the time I reached the station, the rain had arrived in earnest. Not a drizzle, not even a shower, but sheets of water hammering the windshield like impatient knuckles. There he stood, under the flickering station light. Hood-up backpack slung lazily over one shoulder, taller than I remembered. Leaner, but the same lopsided smile part, boyish charm part, reluctant gratitude. "Thanks for coming, Aunt Julia," he said, slipping into the passenger seat. His voice was deeper now, warm. "Didn't mean to mess up your night. Oh, trust me," I said. Glancing at him, I was halfway through a plot twist and already falling asleep. "This is far more interesting." We laughed. For a moment it felt easy, but the road had other plans. Rain blurred the world into watercolor streaks. Lightning split the sky like angry handwriting. Thunder chased behind, loud enough to rattle the rear view. Barely 10 minutes into the drive, the downpour turned biblical. I tightened my grip on the wheel, squinting into the smeared blur of headlights. "I think we should pull over," I said. My voice clipped, my knuckles pale. "This is getting dangerous," Theo nodded. "There's a rest stop up ahead. I think that's our safest bet." We found it. A gravel patch beside a shuttered diner and a forgotten maintenance shed. I tucked the car under a small overhang and shut off the engine. The silence inside was instant, except for the roar of rain and the soft puff of our breath fogging up the windows. While I exhaled, "Looks like we're here for a while." Theo leaned his seat back a bit and gave me a grin. "Guess we're roommates tonight." We both chuckled, but this time there was a shift, something quieter. Not quite awkward, but aware. That kind of awareness that settles in closed spaces when the storm outside traps more than just your body. And suddenly, I was looking at him differently. Not the boy who used to kick a soccer ball into Lorraine's rose bushes, but a man-defined jawline, thoughtful eyes, a stillness in his presence that I hadn't noticed before. "You always were the cool aunt," he said after a pause. "You never hovered, gave people space." It mattered, even if I didn't say so. I tilted my head toward him, lips curved. "That's a poetic way of saying I didn't meddle." "No, I mean it," he said, more earnest now. "When things were rough with Mom, you were the only one who didn't treat me like I was broken." He didn't just mean childhood. I could hear it in his voice. He was talking about all the unsaid things that lived in the gaps of our family. I appreciated that, Julia. He said my name, not Aunt Julia, just Julia. Something shifted, not inappropriate, just unexpected. "You always had this quiet elegance," he said, almost to himself. "Like you knew something everyone else didn't." I didn't reply right away. The air inside the car had thickened, not with heat, but with something else charged and strangely intimate. I shifted slightly, became aware of the collar of my blouse, the outline of his gaze. "You're very flattering tonight," I said, forcing a chuckle. He smiled slower this time. "I'm just being honest." Outside, the storm continued like a drumbeat. But inside, time had slowed. My heart thudded not out of fear, but from surprise. From being noticed. Truly seen for the first time in a long time. Theo leaned back, hands folded behind his head, our eyes drifting to the ceiling. "Do you ever think a single night can change the way you see everything?" I swallowed. "Sometimes yes, but usually we only realize it after the fact." He nodded, said nothing more. And for a moment we just sat there, listening to the rain blur the boundaries of everything we thought we understood. Then Ethan turned toward me again, his face unreadable. "You're beautiful," he said softly. "Not beautiful for your age, just beautiful." I turned my gaze to the rain-smeared window, hiding a blush I hadn't felt in decades. "Ethan, I know he cut in quickly," his tone low, sincere. "I'm not trying to make things weird. I'm not crossing any lines. I'm just saying what's true. I don't think you hear it enough. But you should." His words settled between us like a heavy blanket, warm, uninvited, strangely welcome. We didn't touch. No rules were broken, but something shifted. A silence took shape that wasn't awkward, but reverent. Like we'd stumbled into a truth neither of us had meant to find. The night stretched on. The rain softened, the thunder retreated, but neither of us made a move toward the keys. Time seemed to slow and pool around us. We talked more about our family and its fractures, regrets, unrealized dreams. About solitude. Somewhere near midnight, the rain eased to a whisper. But neither of us stirred. I watched as he drifted to sleep beside me, his expression soft, childlike, in the dim light. And I just sat there, watching the road blur through the fogged windshield, heart tangled with questions that didn't have answers. What he said, what he saw in me, I couldn't unhear it. Not that night, not ever. The dawn came slow and reluctant, like it didn't want to interrupt. I must have fallen asleep around forehead, leaning against the cold glass arms, crossed for warmth. My neck ached, and the chill had settled into my bones. Yet somehow I felt strangely at peace. Ethan was still asleep when I opened my eyes. His chest rose and fell in that quiet rhythm that only deep sleep offers. Mouth slightly open, lashes dark and still against his cheekbones. For a brief second, I just looked at him, the way a mother might look at a sleeping child. But it wasn't motherly. Not really. It was something else, gentler, more conflicted. Something I didn't want to name. I caught myself, shook the thought away. We were family, by law if not blood. And even if we'd barely known each other, even if he saw me as something more, I couldn't allow myself to go further. Still, I didn't wake him. Instead, I gently cracked the car door. The crisp morning air poured in fresh with the scent of wet leaves and earth. The storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed and new. That kind of quiet always feels like a second chance or a warning. Behind me, Ethan stirred and murmured something. "Mom, good morning," I said, softly stepping out of the car. "Come stretch your legs." We survived the night. He sat up, rubbing his eyes and yawning. His shirt had crept up a bit, revealing the lean line of his waist. I looked away too quickly, ashamed I'd noticed at all. But he saw me. And when our eyes met, he didn't tease or flinch. He just gave me that sleepy, knowing smile and wandered toward the trees at the edge of the lot. "Kinda beautiful out here," he said, after a pause, gazing into the morning mist. "Feels like the world hit pause." I nodded. That's what I love about mornings like this. Everything feels possible again. We stood there in silence for a while. A quiet that felt like walking across thin ice, fragile but peaceful. Then he turned toward me, voice tentative. "Last night?" He stopped. "Yes," I asked, bracing myself. "I meant what I said. About you. About how you make me feel. I don't want the sunrise to erase that. Something squeezed in my chest. That familiar, painful war between being seen and staying safe. I heard you," I said softly. "And I believe you. But Ethan, this is complicated. You see that, right?" He nodded, shoving his hands into the pockets of his jacket. "I'm not trying to disrupt your life. I'm not even sure what I want. I just know something shifted for me. And pretending otherwise feels dishonest." I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't playing. He wasn't high on nostalgia or drama. He was confused, yes, but sincere. We got back in the car. I started the engine. The heater groaned awake with a gentle hum. As we drove toward the cabin where his friends were staying, I caught him looking at me in the rearview mirror. And I realized I'd been doing the same. Neither of us spoke about it, but we were trying quietly, desperately, not to lose whatever fragile thread had been spun between us that night. When we arrived, the cabin was still and quiet, not yet awake. I pulled into the gravel driveway and put the car in park. Ethan lingered, hand on the door handle. "You want to come in for coffee?" he asked, his tone hopeful but restrained. I shook my head. I should head back. It's a long drive. He looked down, fingers fussing with the hem of his sleeve. "Will you call me after this? Even if it's just to talk?" I nodded. "Yes, I will." He smiled, leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. Not rushed, not insinuating, just warm, gentle, real. As I drove away, my hand lingered over that spot on my face where his lips had been. My heart ached not in sorrow, but in weight. Something had rooted itself deep, and I wasn't sure how to name it. The days that followed moved quietly. Morning walks, brief phone calls with Lorraine, evenings curled on the couch with a book and a teacup balanced on my knee. But under the surface, there was a hum, like something unspoken waiting in the wings. And then 5 nights later, the phone rang. It was late past 10. I was already in bed, face mask on, glasses sliding down my nose. Hey, Ethan's voice came through the speaker, soft and cautious. I hope it's okay I called. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Of course it is. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, failed relationships, the parts of ourselves we usually hide from others. He admitted how lost he felt lately, how disconnected. I admitted how quiet my world had become since the divorce, how hard it was to be needed by no one. We talked about aging once, how it can feel like fading, how invisibility sneaks in, not suddenly, but in slow, subtle ways. How desire seems to pass over women like me, as if we've become part of the wallpaper of the world. You're not invisible, Ethan said, then his voice low, unwavering. You're stunning, you're wise, you're magnetic. I closed my eyes and let those words wash over me, soak in. Like sunlight through stained glass, warm-colored by something deeper. I don't know what this is, I whispered. What's happening between us? But I don't want to run from it. Then don't, he said gently. Let's just take it one breath at a time. That night I dreamed of the rain, of the heat of his gaze in the car, of the kiss he pressed to my cheek, light and real. When I awoke, I wasn't afraid, I was curious. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something again. 2 weeks passed before he called again. We'd spoken briefly, quietly, late at night, never for long. But that call felt different. His voice wasn't hesitant, it was bold, hopeful. I was wondering, Ethan began slowly. Would you want to come to the cabin, just us, just a weekend? No pressure. I was at the kitchen table, tea cooling in my palms, the hush of the house, louder than usual. I stared at the steam curling from the cup. To the cabin I repeated, not because I hadn't heard, but to stall. I know how it sounds, he said, a tremor in his voice. And maybe it's reckless, but I can't stop thinking about that night. How it felt, how you looked at me. I need to know, did that mean something to you too? I didn't speak. I couldn't. Not because I was unsure, but because giving it voice meant stepping over a threshold I'd always lingered behind. That invisible line between desire and discipline, between almost and everything. But the quiet pull inside me hadn't dimmed. It had only grown louder. Yes, I said finally, I'll come. He picked me up that Friday. The drive up was silent, not from discomfort, but anticipation. The kind of quiet that hums with everything unspoken. The cabin in daylight looked softer than I remembered. It was wrapped in stillness. bare trees stood like statues, and low hills surrounded us like folded arms. He carried my bag inside without a word, setting it gently by the door. There were only 2 rooms, the bedroom and the open living space with its dormant fireplace at the center. "I'll sleep on the couch," he said quickly, maybe too quickly. I gave a small smile. "Let's not make this harder than it is, Ethan." He paused, eyes searching mine, then nodded. The evening drifted slowly, easy wine easier conversation. We cooked together, I stirred, while he chopped. Our hands brushed once over a cutting board, and time seemed to pause mid-breath. By the time we sat before the fire cheeks, warm from wine and the glow of something deeper, it was late. But my heart wasn't racing from alcohol. It was racing because of him, because of how close he was, because of the softness in his eyes. You know, he said, poking at the embers, "I don't think I've ever felt this kind of connection before." I tilted my head gently. "You're young. You have time." "I don't care about time," he replied, finally turning toward me. "I care about this." I swallowed. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't reckless. They were quiet, clear. "This is complicated," I said. "What would people think? What would your mother say?" "My mother hasn't known my heart in years," he said. There was no bitterness in his tone, just truth. "But you make me feel seen. You make me feel safe." That word safe hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so long chasing the fire of passion or the dignity of independence. But maybe, after everything, safety was the most intimate thing of all. I reached for him, fingers brushing his. Slowly, carefully, he turned his hand over, let mine rest inside his. Warm, firm, present, and then gently, he leaned in. The kiss was slow, tender. Not a claim, but a question. And I answered. We didn't rush. There was no urgency, no clumsy hunger. Just a gradual unfolding, the rediscovery of skin of breath, of what it means to feel. His lips moved across my cheek, my jaw, my neck, like someone learning a map they already loved. My hands moved along his shoulders, his back, each touch, deliberate, reverent. This wasn't lust. This was something else. A recognition, a remembering of the fact that I was still here, still alive in a body I'd grown used to ignoring. Later we lay on the rug, near the fire, the flickering light drawing soft shapes on the walls. My head on his chest, his arm around me. His heartbeat, steady grounding. "Are you okay?" he whispered. "Yes," I murmured. "More than okay." After that, we didn't speak much. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of what had passed between us, full of what we didn't need to say just yet. There were no more words needed. Just fingers laced together, warm skin meeting warm skin, and that quiet, unwavering understanding that what had just unfolded between us wasn't reckless, wasn't shameful. It was raw, honest, undeniably real. The morning after, everything moved slower. Gentle smiles exchanged over coffee fingertips, brushing as we passed the sugar. It was the kind of silence that feels whole, not hollow. I made breakfast while Ethan stood in the doorway, eyes on the hills as sunlight crawled across them, like a secret being revealed. "I don't know what any of this means yet," he said softly, not turning around. But I do know I want to figure it out with you. I looked at him then. This man who was once just my sister's boy. Someone I'd known as a child, but was now something entirely impossibly different. I want that too, I said, and the words settled inside me, like they'd been waiting there all along. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt awake, present, ready. Funny how a weekend can sharpen your whole life into focus. When we left the cabin, Ethan drove most of the way in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because what had been said still lingered in the air between us, like smoke from the fire, clinging to our clothes and skin comforting in its presence. By the time we pulled into my driveway, the sky had begun to blush pink at the edges. And with that familiar dusk came a familiar feeling. Not regret, but reality, the kind that patiently waits after joy, ready to resume its post. He walked me to the door. The porch light blinked on, casting his face in soft amber. "Do you want to come in?" I asked, keys already in my hand. His smile was gentle. "I want to, but I think I shouldn't. Not tonight." I nodded deeply, grateful for his understanding, for the kind of restraint that speaks to something deeper than desire. "I'll call you tomorrow," he asked. "You'd better," I said, placing a kiss on his cheek before unlocking the door. I stood there after he left, arms folded, cool night brushing over me. I watched the taillights fade into the curve of the road and wondered how something that had started so suddenly could feel so inevitable. The days that followed were a quiet, slow unraveling of the routines I'd once clung to. I still made tea in the mornings, still listened to my mystery podcasts, still tended to my garden, but my mind, it wandered now, to his voice, to his hands, to the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. We texted nearly every day. Sometimes silly photos of what we were eating. Sometimes jokes that made me groan aloud. But other times, it was different. Words we hadn't said to anyone else. Memories we didn't realize still held weight. Things I hadn't even told myself. It felt easy. Natural, but not without weight. One evening the phone rang. "Claire." "Julia," she said quickly. "Has Ethan told you anything about what's going on with him?" I hesitated. Going on how? He's been quiet, distant. He missed family dinner last weekend, said he needed space. He's never said that before. I swallowed. Maybe he's just figuring some things out, she sighed, clearly frustrated. He's always looked up to you. Maybe talk to him. He listens to you. After we hung up, I sat in the living room, surrounded by silence. The weight of a secret isn't always about guilt. Sometimes it's just about keeping something sacred from a world that would rush to twist it. That night Ethan called. I ran into my mom. He said quietly, "She brought up Hugh." I didn't say anything, but I think she suspects. I talked to her too, I said. She's worried. There was a long pause. "Are we doing something wrong?" he asked. I closed my eyes. "No," I said gently. "But that doesn't make it easy." Another silence. "Do you regret it?" The question hit deep. Not because I hadn't asked it myself, but because I already knew the answer. "I regret the timing," I'. "I regret that the world isn't more forgiving." But what happened between us? I don't regret that at all, he exhaled. I needed to hear that. The weeks melted into months. We didn't define anything. We didn't force it. Sometimes he'd come over late and we'd sit in the backyard under blankets with glasses of wine, staring up at the stars, talking about absolutely nothing. Other times we'd go days without speaking, letting time breathe between us. There was no urgency, no panic, just a rhythm we were both learning to trust. I'd find myself questioning it sometimes, staring at myself in the mirror or in the cereal aisle, listening to Claire's voicemails that circled around everything she didn't quite want to name. But beneath the doubt, one truth held firm. He saw me. Not as an aunt, not as a woman past her time. He saw Julia, and in being loved by him, I started to love myself again. Or maybe, for the first time, one night I came home and noticed an envelope tucked beneath the doormat, inside a photo from the cabin. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was laughing, head tilted, sunlight caught in my hair. On the back in Ethan's handwriting were 5 words. This is how I see you. I pressed the photo to my chest. Tears welled up, not from sadness, but something older, deeper. A quiet joy that doesn't shout, but simply settles in. Like it's always belonged. I don't know where this will lead. Maybe it will last, maybe it won't. But I know something opened in me. That night, we got stuck in the storm. A door I thought had rusted shut. A room I didn't realize still held warmth. What Ethan said to me, how he looked at me. It still echoes, not as a ghost, but as a reminder that I'm still here, that I still matter, that I'm still capable of being wanted, of being loved, and maybe most of all, of being understood. And sometimes it takes the right storm to show you exactly who you've always been.